Welcome to the Discovery Doc podcast, where we advocate for optimal wellness and reducing everyday toxic loads, no matter where life takes you. I'm Dr. CeCe, doctor in nursing practice, self-proclaimed toxin tamer, and a crunchy mama.
I'm Anna Kate, a medical mystery overachiever and your discovery liaison. Join us on this exciting journey as we explore the world of holistic health, cutting-edge research, and practical solutions for a healthier life. Together, we'll navigate through the complexities of wellness, sharing valuable insights and expert advice.
Tune in to the Discovery Doc podcast. Get ready to be inspired, empowered, and discover a whole new way of looking at your health.
Welcome back to the Discovery Doc podcast. I'm here with your host,
Dr. CeCe, functional medicine nurse practitioner, self-proclaimed toxin tamer, and mama, crunchy mama of lots of little nuggets, and my co-host over here.
I'm Anna Kate, your medical mystery overachiever and discovery liaison, and we are back with part 2 with the Cortney Campbell, the Cortney Campbell, the anti-cancer mom. And so we did promise you in our last episode to tell you why she is so busy and all the things that she does. So We're gonna dive into that in a minute. But I do have a question for Miss Cortney. What is in your cup? What's in your morning beverage
choice
that you just make it this way? And what's your day?
Oh gosh. So I drink every morning a matcha Senka green tea blend with stevia at 139 degrees temperature.
Can I have some?
I was just talking about this. I got one of those temperature control mugs for Christmas, and you can place it on the exact temperature, and I like 139 degrees.
Wow. So, how specific?
Yeah, that's going to be good for Discovery Doc trivia.
It is.
Cortney Campbell's preferred beverage temperature?
139 degrees.
I'm like a green tea addict. Like some people love their coffee. I love my green tea. So
love it.
I drink, and honestly, I drink organic green tea from Costco. Nothing fancy, no fancy company or anything. It's just maybe like at least 2 cups a day. Maybe
I need to be in on all these fancy drinks. My Rayleigh, our front desk staff, she comes every morning with like this fancy, beautiful thing and like this glass mug with this glass straw. And I'm like, can you make me some? Because mine is just water with electrolytes, guys.
Do we think we can get you?
Oh, that's good. That's fancy.
Lately it's been celery juice. I've been on a celery juice kick in the morning.
Ooh, yes, I do me some too.
And
little celery shot.
Good. Yeah, it just feels good. So if y'all didn't listen to part 1 of our talk with Cortney is just this amazing healthy living enthusiast. She's a 15-year holistic cancer survivor. I'm going to have her give you the absolute cliff notes of kind of her story, but really go back and listen to episode 1. We talk so much in great detail about just holistic living in general, as well as her journey through cancer. But Cortney, I'm going to give you the floor for a minute before we switch into all things pregnancy and mommyhood related.
Yeah. So in 2008, I was diagnosed with nodular lymphocyte predominant Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a slower progressing cancer. And because of that, we chose to forego chemotherapy and radiation, which was recommended, and pursue a holistic dietary nutritional detoxification approach for 3 months. And so I gave it a 3-month, went hardcore into it. My cancer is going to heal. Our decision was primarily, it was just like a God-directed decision. My husband was prompted that the chemo and the radiation was not for us, and we were going to move on to other things. We didn't know what at the time, and it ended up being the holistic dietary nutritional changes. I went into it for 3 months, was doing really well at the 3-month mark, so we kept on going. And within the 4th month after I started my treatment, I found out I was pregnant, and went on to give birth to my daughter in November of that year, unmedicated birth. And that's my story. My cancer, found out I was cancer free at the 6 month mark after I stopped, after I started my holistic therapies, and is considered in spontaneous remission by the medical community because they cannot say I healed with what I did, but I was spontaneously, my cancer spontaneously went away.
It's such a coincidence that your cancer went away.
Yeah.
That's the word they like to use. It's like, wow, what a coincidence. Like, no,
Right.
like this is hard-earned work that I put in and research and,
Right.
nutrition and everything. Yes, that's wild that they use those
Mhm.
terminologies. But okay, so speaking of you getting pregnant at especially then, and then kind of fast forward to other pregnancies, was there ever like a little bit of fear or anything going through your brain at especially the first pregnancy? Talk us through what were you going through?
Yeah, for sure. I was not in remission when I found out I was pregnant. I mean, we knew we were on the right track because I had swollen lymph nodes, cancer involvement in my armpit, in my neck, and in my rib cage along just below my armpit there. And while we had this one was an egg sized tumor. It was removed for biopsy. That's how we found out I had. This one was about a walnut size. And while I was healing, while I was eating what I needed to and doing what I needed to, this gradually reduced and went away, and it's been gone for 15 years. So it wasn't for another 5 years that we never got a follow-up scan because I was pregnant at that time.
Mhm.
But and then of course I mentioned this in my last interview, we just didn't do a follow-up scan because I was doing so well, and I was just like, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing, anyway. We didn't figure there was anything. Even my oncologist said, if this is reduced, you're probably not having new occurrences pop up anywhere else based on the behavior of your cancer. So um yeah, I think I answered your question. We just
Yeah.
Yeah, did I?
Well, I mean, mentally, where were you at? Like, were you
Was I
fearful?
scared? That's what
Yeah.
you asked me. I knew I didn't get to it. I knew I didn't
We're
get
here
to
to
it.
remind you, it's
Yeah,
fine.
of
We
course I
remember.
was. I mean, I had like well, I just mentioned all that stuff I just mentioned, but when I found out I was pregnant, it was definitely a what are we going to do now? And crazy enough, my first oncologist, we left. That was the one who told us you're going to need to do all this treatment. And I don't have any experience with natural stuff. He was very much like, no, he was not the right fit. Their second oncologist was recommended to us by a holistic doctor that we started kind of seeing for as a touch point. She was a supportive touch point for us. And she recommended this other oncologist that she told us was kind of more open to watch and wait approaches. And so we emailed him my medical records, and we actually didn't switch to him until I think it was around Christmas time. So it was 2 months after my diagnosis, or yeah, about 2 months. And he said, I think that he was the one we had already chosen to go the holistic route. But he was the one to tell us, I think that this is a reasonable track for you to just really monitor carefully. And crazy enough, a month or 2 months later, we saw him, I think like every 3 weeks we saw him just to like touch point with blood work and monitor. And he felt everything, kind of did a physical exam. He said, when I found out I was pregnant, we called him and he talked to us directly. He's like, my wife is actually an OBGYN.
Mm.
And I was just like, Lord, you know what you're doing. I
Mhm.
felt real comforted by that. And so he said, I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to talk to her. And so I guess he went home and talked to her, and she said, I think what she's doing, as long as she's, with this type of cancer and the way it behaves, I think she's going to be okay. She'll, I don't even remember what the conversation went like, but it was just nice to have that reassurance from her too. I've never
Yeah.
met her. Yeah. And so that was reassuring to me. And I just knew I was just going to do my best and keep going. That when I had
Yeah.
morning sickness, I had it for about 6-7 weeks. That was really challenging because I could not eat the things that I was eating. I mentioned in our last interview, or our last part one, about like the vegetable smoothies and the juices and the cottage cheese flaxseed oil mixture. It's called the Budwig protocol and I never even said this. The Budwig protocol was created by a German biophysicist named Johanna Budwig, who was a practicing doctor in the 1940s that experimented on these high oxygen fats that are in that cottage cheese
Yeah.
flaxseed oil mixture. So anyway, just adding that in here.
Little
But
tidbits.
and then all that stuff. I couldn't eat it when I had morning sickness. So, yeah, that was a little scary there, but I quickly it was just a few weeks that I was out. Actually, some of the things, the green stuff, I was not, I was several, like 2 months. I could not touch the green, anything green. It would make me throw up. But the Budwig mixture, that like kind of yogurty consistency, like settled my stomach. It's weird.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I was able to keep with that. And then my supplements I was able to keep with. Um, I couldn't do the SEAC tea because it's not recommended in pregnancy because it's like a detox tea.
Sure.
I'm sure, I think of this often of those women who are doing chemo while they're pregnant, and because that's their only option, or they think it's their only option, or that's all they're given, or they have more severe cancer than I had and they have to do something. Like drinking SEAC tea while I was pregnant would probably not be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Would I have done it if I knew it was making a difference? I probably would have, even though I was pregnant, because I was already taking it. It's not like it's like I just would start. But anyway, so those times were scary. But it all seemed to go by really fast, and it really was like, the reason I chose to do holistic cancer therapy in the first place was because I mentioned this in part one, like hitting that wall of like not being able to have children, like the infertility from the treatment, the cancer treatment was a real possibility. They told me 50 to 70%. And that's why they had me wanted to freeze my eggs and create embryos and freeze them and stuff like that I just didn't feel any peace about. So yeah, to have this pregnancy, I was like, yes, we're going to do this. I think my husband was he was kind of just like, we thought we weren't going to have children for probably 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we were going to go to Europe and buy a house to get a dog and all that stuff. So it was probably more scary just to be pregnant, 4 or 5 months after getting married. Well, no, it was a little more than that, 6-7 months. But then it was to get pregnant while I had cancer. I joke, but you guys get what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
We were shocked by it. We were shocked by it from multiple angles.
Yeah. How did that change? So that pregnancy was so close. I mean, you were in the midst of everything. And then what about subsequent pregnancies? How did that change going into other pregnancies where you were further away from your cancer diagnosis, or even you were past that 5-year mark? Because I'm going to pop a little bubble here. Miss Cortney here has 6 children. And so
that's why she's so busy.
Yes. As you got farther away from where you were cleared, how did that change your prenatal, kind of how you viewed yourself prenatal in that prenatal time frame and things that you implemented in that time frame?
Yeah, so after our first was born, we knew we wanted to have some time between her. We were not she was a surprise, a blessing, a spontaneous blessing that we were not expecting at the time. And so we just knew I knew that I wanted to give myself several years of just still staying hardcore on my cancer protocol before we had any more children. And like really, and even after every pregnancy since then, just giving myself like really focusing on my nutrition and doing some detox and doing like a 30-day juicing challenge or whatever it is, these little things that I've done along the line to restore my body of what it was depleted from while I was pregnant. And so we actually got pregnant again 2 years after, a little less than 2 years after my daughter was born. We found out we were really fertile and that like even we learned that even like staying out of the window of what would be fertile windows with natural family planning, that we needed to be even more cautious because our second pregnancy ended up being a blighted ovum, which is a different kind of miscarriage, and that the baby never grows. It's just, but the sac grows. And so that was way outside of my fertile window. I got pregnant with that baby. So I was tracking my fertility signs and everything. It's fun to be able to talk about this on this podcast because I never talk about it on the cancer podcast. Pregnancy so much. I've gone through with pregnancy. And then after that pregnancy ended up, that took 6 months to naturally miscarry. And we had a supportive doctor here in Atlanta who let me do that, because most of the time they'll DNC you.
Yeah.
They'll be like, but he said, watch for signs of infection. And I did. And it was from July until I brought pregnant in June. And then I miscarried on Christmas Day, Christmas night,
Wow.
like right after we all went to bed. And it was really fast and complete. And I didn't bleed a ton because I had let it run. It almost like, I hope this is like not a trigger for people, but it just, it encapsulated itself, and it was a very complete miscarriage. Whereas like I've had other miscarriages where it was a much more traumatic, because it was such an event, a bloody event, but, anyway, after 3.5 years after our daughter was born, we had our second daughter. And, as far as my methods of delivery, my first daughter was, she was 10 days overdue. And I mentioned this in our last, part one. And, meconium and the amniotic fluid, any other practice I would have been C-sectioned easily, but they let me labor for 49 hours, really, from the point that my water broke
Girl.
to from the point my water broke until, and you know what, a lot of that, and I never had a baby before, so I was thinking, oh, these contractions, oh, it's a little uncomfortable, having to breathe through them. I'm like, I could have slept through those contractions. Now that I've had 6 babies, I would have been like, who knows, you can't remember pain, and you don't remember how it really felt, but it kept me up for 49 hours. It was a rough time, being awake and uncomfortable, anywhere from uncomfortable to in deep transition for 49 hours, but I ended up having her in the hospital unmedicated, and hemorrhaging horribly in that pregnancy. So that was a little scary. And as far as the cancer goes, I did have to sign papers saying, like, if my cancer were to cause any complications or something, like I would not hold them liable, or stuff like that, like the hospital, or like I was aware I was doing this and hadn't treated my cancer or something like that. Something weird. I even had an OBGYN earlier, I've told the story a few times, who we were ready to go to the appointment, showed up and everything, and sat in the waiting room for like an hour and a half, and they never called us in. And finally, after all these patients went in, at the end of the day, his nurse called me back, and he talked to me in the hallway and told me, I emailed you yesterday to tell you that I can't take you as a patient because of your refusal to treat your cancer. And that was heartbreaking. I sobbed. I broke out into like ugly tears, sobbing like ugly tears, like sobbing and can't breathe tears right in front of this guy, because I was so excited. I was 8 weeks pregnant, sick as a dog, excited to see the baby. Anyway, I'm going back, but this is like my first experience, if we're talking pregnancy, that I had with the cancer and the pregnancy, and as far as like people not being supportive. And he told us to protect himself. Like he had patients in the past that had cancer and were pregnant and didn't make it. And he just wanted to protect himself. So,
which is like, okay, I get it. There's a liability thing, but at the end of the day, doctors, they make an oath to do no harm. And so in that moment, how are you not doing harm by declining a patient care? I have never understood that.
It's the Hippocratic oath, not the hypocrite oath.
Right.
And one little letter makes a big difference.
I guess he knew his limitations, and I have mad respect for that now as a mom of 6. Like I know my capacity and my limits, and maybe you just don't know what people have going on in their life. So I'm like, it worked out. It was all meant to be. And I ended up going with a midwife because of him saying no. And then I probably would have ended up with a C-section with him. So with the way that my birth ended up going. So anyway, fast forward, I was talking about my the second birth, couldn't have gone any different. Perfect. Like 8 hours. I barely remember being in like pain. I know I remember I was being in labor, but it was my favorite birth. We didn't know what we were having as well. It was a surprise. So that was like my only birth that I didn't know. Yeah. And we had our first at North Fulton Medical Center here. Well, it was North Fulton Hospital, I guess, here in Atlanta. And then our second was born out at Atlanta Medical Center, which no longer delivers babies. I don't think it even exists anymore. I think it closed down. But she was supposed to be a water birth, and we got there and there were no there was no hot water.
Oh,
They had like no hot water. Whew. So, anyway, I don't know if you guys want me to get into these details, but tell
whatever.
me
It's
what you
your story.
Yeah, it's completely your story.
yeah.
I'm curious just about like the progression, and like you have such a strong background before this in terms of treating yourself holistically, that I'm just so curious in the progression, like moving forward, how that changed your experience in your pregnancies. Like how did it shape it? Did you go into your pregnancies knowing what you wanted to do, what you didn't want to do, what, protecting your health in certain ways? Like, I'm so curious about how that progressed from baby number 1 to baby number 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think I went through each of them praying that like I could just keep interventions just away from me as long as I was as long as, just like with the cancer, as long as I was monitoring carefully, right? There were certain pregnancies that I had to do, maybe take an herb for something or monitor. Like one of my pregnancies, I had my blood sugar was a little high, which was like I'd never had that happen before, and how to get that down without being declared gestational diabetes,
Mhm.
um but I think I just ate well and tried to get my plants in. And then I, after my first daughter, and I had hemorrhaged very badly and almost had to have a blood transfusion, realized that my iron levels probably needed, it was probably because I wasn't eating any red meat. I wasn't eating
Mhm.
any, barely any iron at all. Like I was eating mostly plants. Like maybe that was something I needed to work on later in my other pregnancies. And I started taking like beef organ capsules and chlorophyll. And there's so much like postpartum stuff I learned because my struggle wasn't so much in pregnancy as it was postpartum, like my mental health. And
Mhm.
I never had guessed that would have been a thing,
Yeah.
um, but so every challenge I've been hit with since the cancer, I've had to learn how to heal holistically, because that was my preferred method of how to help my body.
Right.
And so that's always, sometimes has been a point of stress, because I'm like, where do I get this information? Who do I listen to? And especially, goodness, after the Google Medic update, what we call in the blog world, we call the Google Medic update in 2018, you can't find anything on Google anymore. You used to be able to Google, natural remedies for, whatever,
Yeah.
low iron, and now you get the same 16 websites that are all curated from the AI that generates all the same thing, and it's difficult to find a blog post. So I just having to navigate that. But now that's why networks, like actual people, like you have to be connected to actual people and ask every good
Mhm.
piece of advice I've ever gotten, whenever, and I believe because God provides it, is from somebody who either I think of or my husband thinks of. Oh, you should call this person. What was it? Something, I'm looking at my husband, he's over there working. There's something that I struggled with this last pregnancy. He's like, you need to call Susie. And I'm like, I would never have thought to call Susie, because she didn't have natural births and she only had 2 kids, and it was in like the 80s and 90s. Like, how's she going to help me? And I called her, and she knew exactly what I needed. So like, just being connected to
Yeah.
your people so they can help you with these little things that pop up, so you're not panicking when you're not feeling good,
And
right?
even when
Whatever it
you
is.
know, like, the answer, sometimes you just need to be reminded. Like, I know for
Yeah,
myself, I
like
can
I
tell
know.
y yeah, I can tell you what to do all day, but when it comes to myself, like, I'll go to one of my friends, and she's like, "Why don't you just do this?" And it's, like, the simplest thing or the
Oh,
simplest supplement, and I'm like, "Oh,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
you're right." Like, that's
right.
exactly what I
I
need.
mean, I tell people this all day, but sometimes you need someone to tell you.
Yeah.
It's true.
Was
It's
there
true.
anything, you mentioned before that you were on so many supplements when it came to
Mhm.
treating I'm gonna say treating cancer holistically. Was there anything that you had as a staple throughout your pregnancy that you kept on taking for the fact of the cancer aspect?
Yes. So like I took all of my
You did.
supplements. They were all fine. They were all fine to take in the same amounts I was taking them, except for the only thing I switched out was my vitamins had folic acid, and it was a great set of vitamins. Um, it was Dr. David Williams' like multi-packs that they're just, they're pretty affordable for what they are and for how much you get, and the quality of them. It's just, they're a reasonable supplement. But they had folic acid.
Yeah.
So I stopped taking those and I switched over to like a Garden of Life prenatal or something that had folate.
Folate, yeah.
And
So
then
why do we want to avoid folic acid?
Folic acid is basically the synthetic version of folate. So
Okay.
folate is the most bioavailable form that a lot more people genetically can break down and absorb versus folic acid.
And folate does what in pregnancy?
It is the most important vitamin for developing the baby neurologically.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yes.
No, I'm not telling you very
quick?
good. Very good that you shared that.
Yeah, good. But I mean, well,
but also with women in general, not even, I mean, for the baby, yes, like neural tube defects that's the number one thing that will cause if it's deficient in pregnancy. But for women, you can have extreme fatigue and like just be blah all the time and insomnia and joint pain just from that folate being low also.
Good to know. The more you know.
Mike's super short show. Stop it. Anyways, so then, okay, that's, I love that you shared that because I think so many people get fearful of taking natural supplements during, pregnancy. And I'm not, but a lot of people are, because you're right. Like nowadays, when you Google something, all it says is, either ask your healthcare provider, and either they don't have a healthcare provider to ask that is knowledgeable on this stuff, or it says not recommended. And 99% of the time it says not recommended because it's a conventional world in which it's, quote, not studied, but you go to more of the alternative world and there are tons of, studies that say that this thing is safe during pregnancy. So I love that you were encouraged to continue and not fearful to continue, and just educated, whatever, through communities or through yourself or research that you did to empower yourself to continue what you needed to during those pregnancies.
It's also like you'll find more experiential information on the more like practical experiential information. Like this is what I've seen work for my patients versus like this is what's been studied. It's just so like robotic. But I wanted to talk about from like my first pregnancy or my first delivery being so difficult, and like hemorrhaging and all that, to like the contrast to like the perfect delivery of like my second baby, to encourage moms, anyone who's listening, that your births can be totally different. My third birth was at home after having a successful second birth, unmedicated second birth in the hospital. My third birth was at home in the water. And I actually hated a water birth, which is funny. I wanted it so badly for the second, and when the water heaters were down or whatever, and I had to push on the bed, like I did my first laying down, on the bed. I also found out that, funny enough, my babies, you always hear like, oh, laying down, it's the most worst, horrible way to give birth. My babies like to be born when I'm laying on my back. We have the same midwife, right? Debbie said it's probably just the way that your pelvis is, like the baby the gravity helps them get underneath that pelvic bone. But like that's something we learned, because the third birth, really, I tore for the first time. I had never tore, and in the water with the optimal position, I tore. And it was a fast and furious birth, 5 hours. So my births went from 49 to 8 to 5,
Wow.
But all my babies still were overdue by at least a couple of days. They got progressively less overdue, like 10 days overdue, 4 days overdue, 3 days overdue. My fourth baby, we didn't have until we took a 4-year break between, we had another miscarriage. That was the one I was mentioning, was a little more like, we ended up in the emergency room kind of thing, like a little scarier. And a same situation with the blighted ovum. It glitched. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Making sure. So we waited 4 years, swore I'd never have another child. I had pretty severe postpartum depression, which I don't know if we had time. We probably don't, to maybe another episode, but so we did wait 4 years to have another baby, as I sorted through sort of what it was like to be a mother of 3. That was what was challenging for me, being a mother of 3. We're also trying to like do all the things with my blog, and we started a nonprofit, Healing Strong. I mentioned it before, and wanting to do all these things, but yet like, wait, oh, I'm a mother. I can't
Mhm.
just do whatever I want. I really had to learn that energy was a thing and I didn't have infinite amounts of it. And
Mhm.
for me, doing all the things created burnout, anxiety, and then
Mm.
eventually depression, depression from
Wow.
my chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge season of my life that transformed me. I don't talk about it much because I don't know. I don't know if I've completely even wrapped my mind around it to be able to voice. I probably need to go on a podcast and talk about it to really talk it through of what exactly how I got through that and what I see on the other side of that and how I've
Mhm.
changed and what it taught me. But we waited 4 years, and then we had our fourth daughter, who was also born at home, and then 2 years later we had our first son, and
Woo-woo.
yeah, I know it was so crazy. But I see now that that 4 year gap where I wrestled with how to cope and how to learn how to cope with anxiety, depression, overwhelm, burnout, motherhood, how to be a mother and a biblical mother, that
Mm.
you just can't phone things in. You have to be present for your children. Like learning that in that 4 year break taught me um, like taught me so that I could handle the next three, because we
Yeah.
ended up having another baby 10 months ago, which is the baby that you actually, that's where I met you. You came to our house after the home birth to be the home visit pediatrician,
Yes.
and CeCe was here. And that's how I met her for number 6. And so, yeah, so we have like two
Two
sets of
sets of
three. We have our
3.
big 3 and our little 3 with a 4 year gap in the middle.
Do you
And that's actually,
Do you
yeah.
feel like because for me, it's such like I can relate so much to that, and we can go in depth as you're comfortable with. But I know, I mean, I had significant postpartum depression with Ava, and I really attribute it to having to have the C-section and not being able to have bonded with her right away, and also kind of my age, and I didn't do anything to prepare. I got pregnant at 24, was delivered at 25. But I think the other part of it is the balance. And I can so relate to that with 3. There's
Mhm.
something about 3 kids that I think it's way more challenging than like 4. I'm like, by this point, I'm like, 4, we got this. I feel way more imbalanced. But with 3, I just think something comes with that where I experienced that as well. And really throughout almost this pregnancy too, which is why I think it triggered some things that I was going through also early in the pregnancy, is that like that balance of work and the discovery doc and 3 kids and like, am I
Mhm.
taking away time from my children by doing this over here? And I can't be a
Mhm.
biblical mom if I'm not present and I'm
Mhm.
choosing to
Mhm.
be here in front of you, like doing this podcast with you guys. And that's so real no matter what you're dealing with as a mom. Do you feel like now you have created a better balance or a more consistent balance, even though you have more children?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. But it had to, oh, CeCe, it was so hard. I just had
Mm,
to, God just kept saying, it's got to go. It's got to
yeah.
go. Nope. That too. It's got to go. I mean, everything had to go in order for me to truly get to the point where I was like, I just, because my anxiety levels, because my cortisol, everything was just off, because I was just thinking I could do it all. And then fearing, if I don't do it, what's going to happen? If I don't
Yeah.
stay up with my blog, I'm going to become obsolete. All this fear. If I don't, start healing strong and write this guide, write the participant guide or whatever it was, I'm going to, people are going to die. Like these are the kind of things
Yeah.
I was so, when I had one kid, when I had 2 kids, I was able to like at nap time, I could, do my thing or whatever. When I had 3, I'm like, and it was honestly a little depressing for me at times to think, because of my worldview at the time, I'm just a mom. If I'm not a blogger, if I'm not an influencer, if I'm not this or that, I'm just a mom.
Mm,
And that belief was like, I wasn't enough. Like my performance, feeling like I was special if I achieved was, and if I helped, like I got that achiever helper thing going on where I want to help, I want to achieve, I want to be something. but I realized that I brought these 3 children into the world, and I'm their caretaker.
Yeah.
Like with you, perhaps, CeCe, I know your mom kind of comes in and like is your partner in that.
She
And so
does.
you have that going on to where you can say, okay, when I do this particular thing, my mom's going to come in and like,
Yeah.
do her grandma thing and like, she could be with the kids in that way, but I'm still their, but you're still their mom.
Yeah.
You're the mom, and they're honestly we are who they want. Our kids want us. Like,
What did you find yourself getting rid of? So you mentioned like the blog and the social
yeah,
media thing. Was that
yeah.
the biggest part of what you got rid of, or were there other
I
things in your
had
life that
to.
you got rid of too?
Well, there were things I added, and then there were things I had to take away. Like, first things that I started realizing kind of on those really bad anxiety days where I felt like I literally at times, and this lasted, when I say postpartum depression, I'm talking aggravated postpartum depression where it was triggered postpartum, more anxiety, and where I felt like, I don't know if you've ever driven, your car is in like neutral and you got the gas pedal on and your engine's like
Mhm.
revving and it's so like on, but you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's how my body felt like when I had that anxiety. I wanted to jump out of my skin because I felt so anxious and my brain could not think clearly, and I was thinking fearful thoughts,
Mm.
crazy thoughts, like intrusive thoughts, but I wasn't doing anything. I was either just like, I was lying in bed or I was whatever. And that continued because that really was, I don't think I would have had that if I wasn't sitting there nursing my baby 3 days postpartum. Yes, feeling uncomfortable. Yes, feeling hormonal. Yes, it was February and it was dark and gloomy outside,
Mhm.
but I don't think I would have struggled with it as much if I also weren't thinking, well, I got to get back to that comment or that email,
Mm.
or I want to start writing that course I want to put out again, or whatever it was. Like I wasn't able to shut my mind down. If I don't, it was a lot of like, if I don't help this person who emailed me at the time, I had you could message me from my blog. So like some of the practical ways after like a year and a half of struggling with this, because when my daughter was 16 months, this is my third daughter,
Mhm.
between number 3 and number 4, the 4-year gap. At 16, when she was 16 months, it just progressively got worse to the point. And, with any progression of any mental problem or emotional or burnout or whatever, it kind of progresses like this. Like,
Yeah.
it's like a slow boil, right? Until you get to the point where you can't handle it anymore and you blow. And I laugh. It was not funny. I couldn't sleep for 6 weeks. I got a cancer score back. I was obsessed. I mentioned being obsessed with I got to the point where I was like, I have to buckle down on my nutritional stuff, because if I don't do that, then my emotional stuff is like unhealthy. So I at least have to stay really strict with my nutrition, and like
Mhm.
obsessing over that became something that if I couldn't, and then I would stress because I wasn't eating perfect enough. Like, what if my cancer comes back? And it's in such a
Mm.
unhealthy state of fear of, if I don't, God won't. Like if I don't eat perfectly, then my cancer is going to come back. Or if I don't keep up with my blog stuff, then I'm going to become obsolete and Google won't pick up on my whatever. And then more people won't see my post. And this is the kind of stuff that I stressed over. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this is relevant, but it was at the time because I was so passionate, and I still am passionate about holistic cancer stuff. But I recognize, and I still get an unhealthy, every now and then I'll be like, I'm spending a little too much time focusing on um, this part that's, on my blog or on Instagram or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, and I feel it, like
Wow.
psychologically, I get a little weird, right? Like a
Mhm.
little bit frazzled, irritated. It usually starts for me like being irritated, being moody, being short. Um, you know. Now I will say, there's a lot of simple things you can do. For me, the things that had to go, like being in contact with anybody directly, had to go. So I
Mm.
removed all my messaging, things that people could get in contact with me. I created an auto reply for if any messages did come in from, because I have an email list, and I would email out like a little article once a month for like for a year and a half or 2 years. I had to stop that too. Like
Mhm.
stop my email list, stop blogging, very minimal social media, like reading or writing on social media, because reading also kind of would either trigger ideas or like I'm like, oh, I
Right.
gotta write something, or it would like I would feel like I'm falling behind, I'm becoming obsolete, and everybody else is doing what I know I can do way better, or or I can just do it at all, and
Yeah.
just feeling like I need to be present and available for people. And yet I have these three little girls that are like, Mommy, you're all I have.
Yeah.
We don't have anybody else that we have around. And yet I was like giving my first fruits every morning. I would get up early and I would do my blog stuff. And then I would kind of feel overstimulated from
Mhm.
all the cancer stuff. It's heavy. And then I would go into the day and I would just kind of be like, all right, when like I felt like I was getting taking care of my children, but all I could wait for was nap time. Cause then at nap time, I
You
could
could
go
get
back
more
doing,
done.
yeah, I
Yes.
could get more done. And so everything had to go. And so over the course of like 3 or 4 years, everything, even my blog, it's even today, it's like totally outdated. I
Yeah.
just stopped paying it any attention because it was like an idol for me. It was
This
a,
is so wild to hear because I can
yeah,
so deeply relate to this. So
I know you
deeply.
can.
Like,
I know
so
every
deeply.
person, every mom that's trying to hustle out there on the internet and do their Instagram stuff and you watch them, every one of them feels this
Yeah.
because it is very addicting to know that you can put out what you are already passionate about and yet grow a business or grow a
Yeah.
consulting or whatever. And in your case, this is like your passion. This is what you went to school for. Like you have a practice and you really do help people get better. And so it's just hard to balance that with these little people that are like, you know, mom.
Yeah.
But I do think you can balance. You have to recognize like when you'll just know, you'll know. And if you're praying and you're saying, God, just please make sure you're directing my steps. I find that it has been hard to balance completely. I always go a little bbit too much into it and then I have to pull back again.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like I get a little too involved in social media, or it's mainly for me ideas like, oh, I could create this and then I could reach this many people and share this message with them. And it's like, not right now.
Right, and it's hard, like, I had to get over the guilt aspect of it because for me, it is kind of a double whammy, like, when I see patients in person, that patient comes to me because they need my help, they need me, and it's taken me a while to get to this point where I'm okay with saying that, "Hey, I need to prioritize my family and myself, and I love my patients and I love my practice, but that is secondary, which is why I will only see patients 3 days a week." Does that but it takes a lot to get to that point where you're okay with it because to me, for years, I was like, "Well, if I just work 5 days a week and I could see all these patients, I could help so many more patients in that week, and then they wouldn't have to wait, 6 weeks to come back to see me. I could see them more frequently, but at what cost? At the cost of not being around my children." And I caught myself the same thing kind of on the social media front with the Discovery Doc. I go through this all the time with it. I'm kind of at it right now where, especially before I have this baby, where I'm like, I need to just stop because there's too many things on my plate right now. And what's sacrificing is the time I have with my kids. But
Mhm.
it's so up and down and it's so hard because like you said, we're so passionate about this stuff and we know by like getting this information out there, it's not about me. Like I don't give a, what if I had 4 followers or a million, but it's about just getting those options out there and like people just, feeling empowered that I feel guilty when I do stop. But it's like that teeter-totter is so stinking hard. So I can just really relate to everything that you're
Well,
saying.
even when you're not physically doing it and working, your brain stays on.
Yeah.
And that's one of the more challenging things because you're
Yeah.
like, I have all these ideas. I have like a little notepad, like a little note thing on my
Me
phone and I
too.
put them down. But I'm like, it's just like miles long because
Yep.
I don't have time I don't have time to execute any of my ideas, but I have them.
Yeah.
And
And
and if I'm really honest, sometimes I get jealous of like, either my husband or of men in general, especially men in what I do, because it just does seem to be that the men are the ones that are always getting. But I'm like, but this is my unique season and my unique role
Mhm.
right now. I'll never have the season again.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know, because I'm like, as a mom of 6, I'm also going to be a grandmother of all the
Yes.
children, 6 children of these 6 kids. So like, I'm always going to be needed, right?
Right.
So it's just going to be a matter of trusting that whatever I can give, that God's going to do something with it, and it's going to matter in the ways that it matters, for the people that it reaches.
Yeah.
And he can multiply anything, right? He can
Yes.
multiply my message and get it out to whatever, even though I only spent 2 days working or whatever it is, as I get, and I'm also learning that even though I'm more tired at night, I'd rather give a little bit of effort at night after the kids are in bed than in the morning before they
Yeah.
get up, because I tend to turn my creative brain on, and then it's hard to shut it off for them. And
Right.
I go back and forth. This is
I
not
do
like
too. No,
what to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Some
something
days
you
it's
said
easier to shut
earlier
it off.
that I was like, I resonated with so much because I used to do this all the time and I really had to conscientiously move away from this, was I would put the kids to bed quickly or I would put the kids down for a nap quickly because I had a mile long list of things that I need to get done for the
Yeah.
discovery doc. Like my office is really great. Like when I leave my office, I'm done with work. But like I'll check in with Heidi or whatever, but it's the Discovery Doc stuff where I would be putting them down and be like rushing to my laptop to get it done or, rushing bedtime routine because I needed to go get stuff done. And I'm like, dude, no, like slow down. And then it kind of morphs into, well, now I should be spending this time with my husband. And, then
Oh,
you
yeah.
get that part of it. And it's
Oh,
just that
yeah.
balance. It's tough. It's really, really tough.
Yeah, he tends to work also. It's where we both, he has to work too. I mean, this economy is nuts. You
Yeah.
gotta, people have to work, keep up. You have to work like 30% more to keep up with the 30% of prices that have
Yeah.
gone up. But yeah, so he'll often like, sit with his laptop and I'll have mine at night or whatever, and we can run things by each other.
Yeah.
One thing that's fun that I'm doing is kind of going back, because like it's fun to be creative and it's fun to use your, when you have good ideas, you want to share them with people. So I've written a smoothie book for large families. It has 55 recipes, smoothie recipes for large families, so you can make them in like a big blender, because
Amazing.
most smoothie books or smoothie recipes online, it's like they're not designed to be like a meal replacement for smoothies. So this book I have, it's taken me a year and a half to get to the point I'm at now. But just plugging away at it while I've been in the kitchen, and like, having the kids try the recipes, like involving them in what I'm
Mhm.
doing. Like
Yeah.
that's one idea to what I've done that has worked. I'm like, this works. I can do this. And then at night, of course, then I can format the recipe or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
So I
but
I want to respect your time. I know we both
yeah,
were
yeah,
like, we had to go 30 minutes ago, but is there kind of just wrapping up then, because I know we could talk forever and we'll love to have you
Yes,
on.
you're definitely on the comeback list.
Yes,
oh, you guys are
110%.
fun.
But
Thank
is
you.
there like throughout just you have such a unique journey, throughout your unique journey, what to any other woman out there, even mom or not, just leave us with kind of your top tip for how you choose to lead your life for that woman out there that might be struggling either with their health or kids or whatever it might be. And then also give us all the details on where our community can find you.
I would say, like, know your principles, know what you believe at your core, and that it's the way you want to live your life and raise your family. But don't be afraid to say, um, it's okay if I wasn't perfect this time. It's okay. Like, live in a sense of grace, like constant grace for yourself. I run into a lot of moms in the holistic community that are just so rigid and just tight. And that's not healthy either. That's almost more harmful than because it comes from a place of fear, like the whole "if I don't, God won't" mentality. So I think that's just the most important thing. Like, know your principles, know what there's certain things that are like what do you call it when it's like a no-go or you're not something you're not. Yes. Yeah. I'm not negotiating on this. This is what I'm sticking to. But then there are other things that are more flexible. So I'd say just know that, have lots of grace for yourself, enjoy your children. If you're, a mother, and be silly with them. Sometimes eat something naughty with them and enjoy it, yeah, I wish, I could have listened to my own advice, 5 years ago and probably have avoided some problems that were caused by feeling like if I, that I didn't have the flexibility in my choices. So.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing all of these very, very intimate and personal details about your life. I just think that you are such a light, and you throughout this, I'm just such a firm believer that everybody's journey is for a reason, right? And here you are balancing being a mom of 6, but also spreading that light for, all these other people, and building all these amazing communities for cancer, survivors, but also people who are going through cancer currently. Right. And that is it's so invaluable. So thank you for what you're doing and for what you're sharing.
You're welcome, guys.
And just leave us with where our community can get in contact with you.
Yeah, just Anti-Cancer Mom on Instagram and anticancermom.com, or Cortney at anticancermom.com. Cortney without a U, although I think I have the email address with the U as well, because
that was smart.
It happens. It happens. Smart. The U happens.
Yeah. You happen.
Hey. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Cortney, again for joining us. We are so excited to share this with anybody who is going to listen, and we will absolutely have you on again. But until next time, let's discover together.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey of exploration and learning as much as we have. Before you go, we have a special request for you, our beloved discoverers. We'd be thrilled if you could show your support in a few easy steps. Step 1, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a moment of discovery. Step 2, if you're listening via Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to rate and review our show. Your feedback means the world to us and helps others discover our podcast too. Step 3, whether you're on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, please share the Discovery Doc podcast with your friends, family, and social networks. It's the best way to spread the joy of discovery. And finally, don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Discovery Doc. Stay connected with us for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and so much more. Plus, for exclusive content and additional resources, be sure to check out our website at www.thediscoverydoc.com. And while you're there, if you have a burning question or a topic you'd like us to discuss on the show, simply let us know. Thank you, Discoverers, for being part of our incredible journey. Until next time, let's discover together.
The content provided in this podcast provides general information and discussions on various topics related to health, wellness, and medical advancements. However, it is essential to understand that the content provided in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The host, guests, and contributors are individuals sharing their personal experiences, opinions, and knowledge in their respective fields. While they strive to provide accurate, up-to-date information, medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and the information presented in this podcast may not always reflect the most current research and medical guidelines. It is crucial to consult with a qualified healthcare professional or medical expert for specific medical concerns. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking medical treatment based on the information presented in this podcast. The Discovery Doc podcast encourages listeners to use their own judgment and discretion while implementing any suggestions, recommendations, or lifestyle changes discussed in this episode. Each individual's medical situation is unique and may work for one, may not be suitable or safe for another. The podcast hosts, guests, and contributors are not liable for any direct, indirect, consequential, or incidental damages or harm that may arise from listening or acting upon the information provided in this podcast. Listeners are responsible for their own health decisions and should exercise caution and seek professional guidance when necessary. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that you have read, understood, and agreed to this medical disclaimer. If you have any questions or concerns about this medical disclaimer, please consult a qualified healthcare professional.